Hello, this is my episode by episode breakdown for Man in the High Castle Season 3. This is my first time doing this, so please bear with me if I stumble a little bit while getting used to the format. I don't want to, unlike some people who do an episode by episode breakdown, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the plot of the episode. This will be full of spoilers, so stop now. I'm not going to do a spoiler-free review of the show. So instead of spending a lot of time talking about the plot, I'm just going to read the plot description of the episode and then begin my comments after that. So, episode 1, titled Now More Than Ever, We Care About You. Let me get the information for who directed it and who wrote it. This is my inexperience. This information I should have had ready already at hand. I do have it here though on IMDb. While I'm waiting for that, let's just read the description for the episode. Juliana Crane makes a new acquaintance in the neutral zone, an Irish fixer named Wyatt, and soon finds herself on the run and seeking Tagomi's aid. The Japanese test an atomic bomb. Joe Blake is sent on a diplomatic mission to San Francisco. Kido hires a new sergeant. Nicole Dormer arrives in New York to head a new propaganda campaign. The Smiths struggle with the aftermath of Thomas's death. That gives a brief description for what's happening to every character, but the focus is in the episode is primarily on Juliana and on Joe Smith and Joe Blake, with only a little bit about the Japanese intrigue. Most of it is centered in the neutral zone and in New York. So that's a description of the episode, brief description of the episode. And let me give cast details and then move on to my comments. I'm loading up the cast details right now on IMDb. We can talk about, referring to cast details, we can talk about some of the background of the show. The showrunner changed between seasons number 2 and seasons number 3. And in fact, the showrunner left in the middle of season 2. It would be of note, but I think for the most part, season 2 remarkably holds up. There are some pacing issues, but with the departure of a showrunner mid-season, you would expect there to be more flaws, that it would be really hard for the show to carry through completion without one person in charge of the vision of the show. I didn't see that. However, I do see signs that there was a change of showrunner between season 2 and season 3. For one of the rumors that I've heard is that the showrunner, and do I have the name of the name of the previous showrunner? I meant to write it down, I didn't. Frank Spotnitz. One of the reasons he left was conflict over the budget. The budget for the second season is much larger than it was for the first season. And I think one reason for the increase in the budget was that the show began to sprawl a little more. Some of the action is centered in Berlin and the intrigues of the generals behind the scenes in Berlin. So you have to create Berlin of the 1950s, 1960s, a fake Berlin that would have happened after Germany won World War II. So not even can you just research what Berlin was like in the 1960s in our world, you have to invent one. That's money. Then you have to hire people to play all the cast that you need for a realistic, prosperous Berlin of the 1960s. That's more money. You have to create their costumes. That's more money. You have to create the special effects for all the buildings. That's more money. So I imagine one of the reasons that the budget ballooned was basically just setting so much of the story in Berlin. I bring all that up because you can see that maybe the new showrunner, one of his goals, his directives was to bring the costs down. So we don't have any intrigue going on in Berlin. Maybe there will be later in the season, But characters who were in Berlin at the conclusion of season 2 are very quickly brought to New York. And not just the main character, Joe Blake, but also his girlfriend comes, magically finds a purpose to be in New York. So that's one way that we see that there's a new showrunner, a change in locale, a narrowing of focus. And also, I think another way we can see that there's a new showrunner is emphasis on the characters. I've seen online a critique of the acting of the actor who plays Joe Blake, and I'll get his name. Right now, I'm using my Kindle to draw information for Man in the High Castle, and I was hoping this process would be a lot more fluid and faster than it is, but it isn't. But in 1 second, just waiting. Okay, here we go. Luke Kleintank plays Joe Blake. One way that we can see that maybe there was some behind the scenes shifting in the show is the challenge that is given to the actor that plays Joe Blake. You could almost call him Joe Blank, because so much of his emotions held in reserve throughout the first 2 seasons. He does have moments of emotional tension, but for the most part, a lot of what is going on, the conflict within the character, is withheld. However, very early in the episode, the character is confronted with the choice of kill his father or be killed. And in that scene, Joe Blake, Luke Kleintank, the actor, is given the challenge of conveying the conflict that he feels, the emotional duress, and then a combination of programming or survival instinct. Because immediately after killing the father, and in a tight close-up, we see that his tears very quickly go away. And the actor has to put himself into 2 different extreme emotional states in order to do that. So I thought it was a very good scene. Very well done. The acting was very well done, very well executed. Maybe his best moment in the series so far. So, other things I want to mention. Some miscellany, in case you missed it, moments. At the beginning of the episode, I get them confused, not Joe Blake, but Oberstgruppenführer Smith, coming back to his apartment in New York, opens a newspaper. And I freeze framed it and took a look at the headlines. It's one of the advantages now of being able to, when you're streaming things, to just pause. Because old television, you couldn't pause. So they had the producers had no incentive to bury details that would be missed by most people. Like opening a newspaper, you see it for 2 seconds. I paused it, and it said that there in New York was an exhibition of the painter Arnold Böcklin. And that's all. Just there's an exhibition, Arnold Böcklin, opening in New York. Boom, that's all. So I went online and I looked up information for Arnold Böcklin, and apparently Hitler was a fan of this painter and owned 11 different pieces of his work. Just that little detail shows the amount of care that they've given to the world building. It could have been a made-up painter. They could not mention a painter at all. But they mentioned one that Hitler really liked. So they are reinforcing the idea of a world that's now been shaped by Hitler. That the people that Hitler didn't like, they disappear. And the people that Hitler favored find acclaim and find their way, they find power, like the character Joe Oberstgruppenführer Smith. Oberstgruppenführer Smith. And speaking of his family, I think from the first episode, it's going to be his story has been the conflict, the tension between what is going on at home and what the world intrigue, and how those two play with each other and reflect each other. The world that he creates at home is a lie, but the children believe the lie. They believe in the Nazi ideology. They've grown up with it, and for them, their lives are meaningless without Nazi ideology. But we also see the tension that exists between surviving and doing what it takes to survive, and not believing in what it takes to survive, not believing the lie that exists around the Nazi ideology. There's that tension between Hubert's Gruppenführer Smith and his wife Helen. And we see now the children, the sacrifice of the son, the two daughters, that son is being raised, being deified for his sacrifice. And the daughters are buying into that sacrifice. We see at the very end when they give the Nazi salute, but the parents don't. And in fact, in the auditorium, when everyone stands up and Sieg Heils, they don't. The mom and dad don't. The two girls do, the children do, and then all the adults in the room do, but the parents don't. And that shows there's a difference between the belief of the parents and the children. Okay, so back to, in case you missed it, at that scene at the end in the auditorium, one of the children sings the song "Tomorrow Belongs to Me." It comes from the musical Cabaret. And I think there was one other interesting detail. Most people, I think everyone's going to know J. Edgar Hoover. Maybe you don't recognize the actor as William Forsythe, character actor, it's been around for a long time. But one important detail, that one of the higher-ups in the American Nazi Party is the real historical figure, George Lincoln Rockwell, who was the founder of the American Nazi Party. Continuing with Germany, we see some more of the historical German figures. They appear that they're going to be an important part of the German influence in America. We see Mengele, I believe that's the first time we've seen his character. Himmler and Goebbels. Okay. Anything else I want to comment upon? Oh yeah, was one other thing. Joe Blake, after he comes back to New York, is given... That looks good. I just saw I was out of focus for a second. This is my new camera, footage from the new camera. It looks sharp. A little bit of frame dropping. But it looks good. Anyway, he is given an assignment to go undercover, like some sort of random trade assignment to San Francisco. We don't know much about it. To the west. We don't know much about it at the time of episode 1. We'll learn more about it, I'm sure, in the future. However, his cover name is Joe Cinnadella, which is the cover name that Joe uses in the novel Man in a High Castle. And one important scene that happens in the novel that has not happened in the books happens between Joe and Juliana. And it happens under the cover of Joe pretending to be Joe Cinnadella. And I had been wondering for 2 seasons if they were going to use this important plot detail from the book. And the fact, either it's just an Easter egg using this cover name, or it's an indication that this important scene that happens in the book between Joe and Juliana that never happened in the TV show, this is an indication that will happen in season 3. And if it does, it will be a very important event in the series. One that will probably move it into a direction. It'll be an important moment in the series, and the direction of the plot should change perceptibly after that event, if it happens. Anything else? 15 minutes? I think kind of covered it. My overall feeling was it was a very good first episode. First episode needs to... It's kind of hobbled. The first episode of a season that has continuity like many modern shows do needs to set up all the events that are going to happen. So there's the danger of info dump, there's the danger of pace, moving too quickly because you need to get things put into place for the subsequent episodes. However, I thought this episode had a real nice balance of important moments for the actors and the characters to shine, to focus on the conflict and the cost of the characters of what's happening, but also set up all the important details that the season will need in order to proceed. So in the end, I think it was a very well done episode, and it leaves me eager to see what will happen in the subsequent episodes, and cautiously optimistic that the showrunner knows what they're doing, they have a handle on the material, and that the show won't suffer a dip in quality, won't jump the shark. That's my thoughts for now, and I think maybe in about another week I'll post up my reaction to episode 2, and until that time, take care and be well.